friends. Welcome to Sky House Herbs podcast. I'm Ashley Elenbaas, a clinical herbalist, and in this space, I share my knowledge and experience with plant medicine to help you on your own journey of healing and transformation. Join me in exploring the ancient wisdom of plant spirit medicine and how it can be used to heal the body, mind, and spirit. We'll talk to experts in the field and share stories from people who've been transformed by powerful plant allies. New episodes are released each Monday, so please subscribe. And now, let's explore this mystical world of plant medicine together. Hey everyone, welcome in. I'm really excited to have you back. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. Today we'll be talking about connecting to your ancestral medicine lineage and why it's important and how we do it in a way that is going to be very deeply nourishing. Before we do that work, I wanted to share with you some really exciting upcoming courses that I'm teaching. So we're going to go over to the Sky House Herbs website. So let's hop on over. So this is my website, skyhouseherbs.com. And if you click over here on courses, you'll see a drop down for 3 different courses that I'm offering. But this is the one I want to tell you about today. So the Herbal Foundations Apprenticeship course is a online self-led course that covers all of the basics of herbal medicine, but in a very deep and rich way. So it's not just like nuts and bolts of herbalism, but really making herbs a personal part of your daily life. So I'm really excited to share this with you. We've extended the early bird pricing, so you still have now an extra week to register to get that deeper discount. And one of the things I love about this course is you'll be working with plants one at a time, and then also learning how to formulate and blend herbs together. So there's a whole list of the different herbs that you'll be learning to work with and to take into your body and to really form a deep connection with. And then you'll also get a chance twice a month to meet with Sky House staff. So you'll meet with me once a month for a live class, and then with my assistant for a tea time study session once a month as well. So you can schedule these out. The tea time study sessions are on weekday evenings, and then the live Q&As with me will happen on one Saturday a month. So we'll give you that full schedule. You can even look at it right here down below. And if you want to register, if you're feeling like, gosh, I'm really curious and I want to take that next step, you can click on the single payment of $9.99 or just click on 12 payments of $99.92 a month. And this will be open until March 22nd. Then it will go to our regular standard tuition, which is $120 a month or $12.99. We also offer tuition assistance. So if those feel out of your price range, click on apply for tuition assistance and fill out this form to tell you what pricing you are eligible for. So once you fill this out, you'll click view pricing and you'll see 1 or 2 different options for you. And these can include both full payments and discounted monthly payments as low as $35 a month. So I hope that that also creates some opening for those who want to study, but maybe just need a little bit of extra help. So please do have a look. I would love to see some of you in this online classroom. We have a great community of people that are excited to study herbs and learn alongside you. All right, so let's now talk about lost healing traditions and how to unlock the power of ancestral herbs. I wanted to start by looking at the word lost. And I love looking at the etymology and sort of the history and roots of different words to help us better understand how we can unpack them to learn more about some of maybe the secrets. It's kind of like, when you flip a tarot card, you've got the word at the top. A lot of oracle cards will say healing or exploration or adventure. And so I feel like when we take a word, it's kind of like flipping a tarot card, but then there's so much more in that word that we can unlock to see what else is hiding under the surface. So the word lost comes from the Proto-Germanic word lausa, which was then translated into English, which means which translates into the English word loss, or LOS. And this means, the root word of lost means to perish or to lose. And I think this is important because if you think way back to our ancestors, when they lived in a time where the world was more maybe mystical and magical, or there was more of an appreciation of that aspect of life, but there was also a lot more danger, right? There was a lot more disease that could be deadly. There were, natural disasters that people didn't have adequate housing or preparation for. There was just, critters and creatures that could come out of the woods and, really disturb the peace. So if we think about the word lost and its implication of meaning to perish, if we think that if our ancestors got lost, or if they lost something valuable, like the knowledge of a plant, or the knowledge of a ritual, or the knowledge of the stars, or the knowledge of certain patterns and cycles that happen around rivers and streams, and the way the sun changes to indicate different seasons, if those were lost, they might perish. And many people did perish. And so, one of the things I think that's really beautiful about thinking about what was lost is that it can help us regain wisdom and skills and tools that can help us also from perishing or feeling like maybe we've lost our way. And I will say, as someone who lives, in this modern world alongside all of you, that especially in my younger years when I was a teenager and coming of age, I was very lost and I acted out, and I was very extreme in my behavior towards my body, and I was very extreme in pushing my body to the limits because I didn't have a safe container, and I didn't have elders who were telling me this is normal. Like, you're this fire, this energy, these questions you have are all normal. And let me tell you stories about your ancestors who went through similar trials. And let me tell you about these plants that can help create balance and ease in your body. I didn't grow up with that. So I was really I flailed for many years. And I think because maybe our culture we don't have ways of marking these rites of passage. We don't have ways of marking these changes in seasons. And I think about like my Lithuanian ancestors, when they would have their spring equinox and their fall equinox and their summer and winter festivals, they were all outside. And I was like, we don't really celebrate this passage of seasons outdoors anymore. It's usually kind of an indoor thing with an altar. We're like protected in our beautiful homes. And, I think, boy, there's something that is lost as we've disconnected from the earth and being outdoors through these cultural shifts of season. But it's not lost. Like, even though we may not have these as part of our modern day culture, there are people that are gathering all over this planet that are still honoring these sacred moments of passage through different times of year. And there are people growing herbs and harvesting herbs and preparing medicines to the different cycles of the moon. So this is not, while it may be lost to the more common culture, it's actually not lost on this planet. Like, these things are happening and you can connect to them. And so I hope that this talk, as I give you some specific ideas, gives you some hope that there are communities that you can plug into, including the Sky House Herb community and the Herbal apprenticeship course that I teach. Like, I'm going to help you plug back in to these ancient ways of viewing the seasons and viewing plants and working with the plants in your body and helping disperse the plants to those in your family or those in your network, so that you can feel connected to these old ways of living and being. So I think it's also not it's not surprising that herbalism is having a resurgence now. I think the resurgence really started in the late 1960s, when the counterculture and sort of people were kind of looking at the culture of the 1950s. A lot of young people were being sent to fight a war that they didn't believe in. And so there was this whole uprising of like, wait a minute, is this what we're here to do? We're here to eat canned food and wear these starchy clothes and go fight wars that we don't understand. Like, I don't think it's always been like that. And they came to discover that no, life hadn't always been like that. So I think since that time, there's been a lot of people saying, okay, I'm interested in this thing called consciousness. I'm interested in these things called rituals. I'm interested in connecting back to my roots. And, there's been sort of waves from the 1960s through the 70s, through the 80s, through the 90s, through the 2000s, 2010s, and here we are in the 2020s. It's weird to think we're in the 20s. Like, we are living in the 20s right now. So in this particular decade, I think a lot of people are starting to really say, I want to invest in my consciousness and in my connection with nature. So here's how I'm going to recommend we do this and just give you tools. You might already be doing these, but I have 3 things that you might find to be helpful. So I'll give you all 3 at once, and then I'll break them down. So the first thing you can do is inquiry. The second is iconography, and the third is ritual. Okay, so let's start with inquiry. And this is where I started with this work. And I feel like, in my 20s and 30s, I wasn't completely closed down to the images and the stories of my grandparents and great grandparents, who I was very lucky enough to have my great grandparents who came here by boat from Sicily alive. So I actually grew up with my great grandparents who spoke Sicilian and cooked and were very much Sicilian. And then also my grandfather's mother, from Lithuania, was around when I was very, very young. But these figures, were always in my head and served as an anchor for me, even when I was kind of not sure who I was or what I was doing. But I think in my 30s, I started really connecting and becoming more interested in my roots, my ancestral roots, and started really paying attention to the stories and asking my grandparents, tell me the stories of your parents and your grandparents. Like, what was the land like? What was the daily life like? What jobs, did your parents do? And what were the jobs of your great grandparents? And as far back as they could remember. So if you have any living ancestors or aunts or great aunts who are, usually there's at least 1 or 2 people in each line who are like the keeper of the stories. So ask them questions. See if there's any books or journals or even photo books or photo albums of your ancestral lines that you can start to look at and start to piece together who those people were, what they learned. And I think it's important to ask the question of not only where were they and where did they come from? Because a lot of people were nomadic. Like, I know, even my ancestors from the early Americas, they came from Wales and they came from France. So on my father's side, there was a lot of nomadic, there's a lot of people that were moving around Europe and then coming to the Americas really early on. And that means something to me. That tells me something about, my line. But so it's not just so much about like, where did they live, but what did they do? And what were their strengths and weaknesses? And I think this is a really important thing. And one thing that is kind of a cool exercise to do is to create a family tree where you look at not only who these people were, like who was married and what children do they have and where do they come from, but noting like what were the strengths of that particular person in your family line and what were their weaknesses. Was there disease? Was there alcoholism? Was there gambling? Was there hoarding? Right? Like there could be a ton of different qualities, but just kind of looking out and seeing from your ancestral lines. And if you have a partner, whether you're married to or just living with, who's a significant other, do theirs too and have them do this and then bring it together and look at the similarities. Like, oh my gosh, you have a banker on your side and I had a banker on my side. Oh, look, if we go way back, farming was both a part of our ancestral heritage. And boy, look, there is alcoholism on both of our family lines. And I think mapping it out is a really good way of seeing the strengths and the challenges that come with that came down through your family line to you. So that's one thing, is inquiring into the family line. The second one that's been really powerful for me is the iconography, which is what were the images that were very sacred to your family and in your family history. So on my grandmother's side, she wasn't raised Catholic, but the symbols of Jesus and Mother Mary and some of the saints were very, very powerful through her father and her mother. And so her father in his later years carved, and he would carve images from the Bible of Jesus and the children, of the Last Supper, and again, just this iconography that was very, very common in Sicily of the Holy Father and the Holy Mother and the Holy Child. And so I've been really working with those, and you'll see in the background here, I even have images, and I've been painting images from that ancestral line, just exploring like, what does the Divine Mother mean to me? And as I've been looking at images of Mary, I've been even going further back and looking at images of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth and the home, and looking at what that means and what that brings up for me. So you can do the same thing and just look at the images of gods and goddesses, of trees and plants. I know from in my ancestry on both my Lithuanian and Sicilian side, the herb rue was grown as a talisman and as a protector plant. So I've been like, oh, wow, isn't that interesting that both of these family lines held this herb to be sacred in very similar ways? So then I feel like a very deep kinship with that plant now. So you can also seek out the plants or trees. In old Europe, usually different villages had a tree that was considered to be very sacred, and maybe even printing out or ordering a painting or an image of that sacred tree from a village from your ancestral land might be very powerful. Like, the baobab in Africa, the oak tree in Lithuania, the rosemary bush in Italy, right? There's all of these great plant symbols of fertility or virility or longevity. And in China, the ginkgo, right? So all of these we can just start to bring in to our daily lives in any way, right? Like creating an altar, the background image of your phone could have one of these sacred images. But I think there's something powerful about letting those images speak and letting them reintegrate to be part of what you see on a daily basis, being similar to what your ancestors saw on a daily basis. And then the third one is a ritual. And this is very open. And some ideas that I wanted to share with you that you might find to be helpful or maybe just affirm what you're already doing is the ritual around food. Did you grow up with the family saying a prayer before you ate? Or was there a particular set of foods that you ate during certain times of year? So bringing back food as part of because we eat, we know we have to eat every day. So that's an easy way of bringing ritual back is, can you bring in foods or spices or practices around food to start to bring that ritual connection back to your ancestral line? Rituals can also also include seasonal cycles and celebrations. And so I know I was raised Catholic because my grandmother converted to Catholicism. She raised her daughters as Catholic. I was raised Catholic. So for me, like Easter and Christmas and Lent, they all have a significance. They're a part of like the rhythms in my life and how I've marked time. So I'm now making sure that I take care to include this in my family's rituals. But then I also want to bring in some of the rituals from other, even more ancient parts of my religious experience or religious background. So, tying, having trees that I offer ritual sacrifices to of milk and honey, right? That comes from the Lithuanian line. So, maybe there's rituals that you can start to bring back from where your ancestors call from. Also, ancestral crafts. And I think this is kind of a cool one too. So, I didn't know this, but my grandmother used to draw and paint. And she was showing me some of her paintings from when she was young. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know that. So I started painting. And then I started noticing, oh gosh, like my aunt paints. My grandmother painted. My great grandmother was a seamstress. So she loved to sew and she would have, she would make the clothing for a lot of people in the family. So my daughter loves to sew. So I'm starting to see that thread come through. So maybe for you, it could be carving, it could be weaving. It could be farming or gardening might be a part of the craft of your ancestral lines. And just, yeah, be curious, ask questions. And also like, what were the heirlooms that were passed down to you? I know that when my great, great, my great grandmother escaped from Lithuania when the Soviets were coming over the hills. All she had were some feather down pillows and some hand embroidered pillowcases that are still in my family line. So, for me, it's like I know at some point I want to pick up being able to knit and crochet because I feel like that's part of what my great great grandmother's hands could do. And I want to see if my hands can do that. So those are the types of things I think are accessible. They're here. And, I don't think it's as dire as perishing literally, but I do think if we don't feel connected in some deep spiritual way to this land and to this world, that our spirits do suffer. And this is where I think a lot of one of my teachers, Rukmini Walker, said that we all have this God-sized hole that we're trying to fill, whether it's through addiction, through food addiction, substance addiction, shopping addiction. There's this way that we're trying to fill this God-sized hole that only God can fill. And so connecting to these ancestral ways of living and these ritual ways of living and these images of the divine in all of these sacred forms can start to create a feeling of fullness inside so that we don't have a hole anymore. So I hope that is interesting and helpful. I would love to hear from you. What are the practices? What are the icons that you reach for? What are the inquiries you've done? How have you maybe scouted out some of your own ancestral stories and connection, because that can maybe give more of us some ideas for how we can do it on our own. So thank you all. I hope to see some of you in my herbal apprenticeship that starts April 24th. And if not there, then I'll see you here in the next episode. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for subscribing, and we'll see you soon. Bye.